You've probably noticed that I've been talking a lot lately about overfunctioning within our relationships, both here, both on this podcast and on my TikTok channel. And the reason I'm focusing so heavily on it is because I don't think many people recognize how much overfunctioning runs in the background of their relationships. Like I didn't. I had no idea for so long until I started bringing it into my awareness and I started to see all of the ways in which I overfunction. But a lot of the times, overfunctioning doesn't look or feel like overfunctioning while you're doing it, right? It feels like love. It feels like care for other people and being responsible and like trying to protect your connection. A lot of the time, I just thought I was being supportive and I thought I was helping people who needed help. I thought I was creating safety within our relationship. But what I have now learned is that I was actually managing. I was managing other people's emotions and their reactions. And especially inside of like a family dynamic, I was trying to manage people's experiences of each other, right? Trying to make sure that within the family, within the dynamic, that nobody felt hurt, that nobody felt rejected, that nobody felt uncomfortable. I mean, naturally, this created a lot of pressure. But from my experience, the pressure didn't actually come from other people. It came from an internal conflict that existed inside of me, where I struggled to allow other people to have their own emotional experience without intervening. And I did that because somewhere underneath all of it, I was afraid that if each individual person had their own experience, the relationship would be threatened in some way. And so then I would always jump in and try to smooth things over. It was like I became a professional mediator inside of my family system, trying to translate or manage people's perception and reduce any tension before anything became a problem. And this dynamic was present in all of my relationships, but I noticed it most profoundly in my household, in my relationship. Like I'm divorced. My daughter's father has not been in her life since she was 2. So she's 10 now. So, I have dated a few people and I brought some of them into my home. And in those moments, I often felt like I was being pulled in two different directions. Like I had to protect each person from the other. And if I didn't do that, then somebody was going to feel abandoned or somebody was going to feel rejected. And it became my responsibility to make sure that everybody within that system felt okay. And I had a moment this past week where I've recognized like all the work I've done about building capacity and all of the things. It made me realize just how differently I handle these situations now than I used to. And I want to bring it here today and I want to share it. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the experience I've had where you feel like you are in the middle between two people. And I relate to this more specifically in terms of, relationship like partners and children. But I mean, this could work with siblings, this could work with parents. It's the same kind of thing where you end up feeling like, one person comes to you and shares their feelings, and another person comes to you and shares their feelings about the other person. And you end up feeling like you're in the middle. Like you end up feeling like you have to translate between the two people, or you're softening one other person's truth. Like you end up just being the monkey in the middle. I found this most strongly in the situations where I was trying to blend a family, right? So I have my partner and their feelings, and I have my child and their feelings, and they're both coming to me, and I'm in the middle. And I remember when I first experienced this in my first relationship after my divorce, I immediately turned to online groups, online forums, blended family groups and forums. And those spaces, my God, they are so conflicting because, on one hand, you have people that say, always put your child first, never abandon your child. You're there to protect them. Your kids take priority, right? And then you have another group of people that say your partner is forever. You should always respect your partner and put your partner's feelings first. And I just always found it so odd that it had to be one or the other. Like it was black or white. It was all or nothing. And in both situations, it was like there was one winner and there was one loser. And I always felt that that sort of mentality created like loyalty conflicts within your relationships. Like now I have to put one person, like a hierarchy, I have to put one person ahead of the other. Why do I have to do that? That it doesn't make any sense to me. And as I'm reading all of this advice and I'm trying to figure out what to do, like I started to become a lot more hyper vigilant, right? And I'm like constantly scanning everybody's emotional experiences. And, oh my gosh, my partner just said that. What I'm looking at my daughter, like, how did she interpret that? Right. And I just ended up becoming this hyper vigilant, emotional monitor. And so from my current lens, I self abandoned, right? I was no longer existing in my own experience. I was putting the experience of my daughter and the experience of my partner over my own, over what, was true for me. And when I think back to those experiences, so the way that I used to respond to these situations was like really getting in everybody's business, right? So my partner would come to me and he would, bitch about my daughter and he would say she's disrespectful and you need to discipline her more, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I would be there saying to him like, well, she's one, only a child. Her emotional responses make sense. Like I would basically be trying to explain to him her emotional processing and her cognitive abilities at her age. And it didn't really matter. Like he didn't really care. But I was trying to like get him to see her side. And then she would come to me and complain about him and say how she didn't like, the way that he talked to her and the way that she, he treated her. And I would say to her, like, you know what, like I get it, but we all live in this house together. You need to be more respectful. And so I felt like I was constantly mediating, right? Like there'd be so many moments where they're spatting at each other right in front of me and I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and they're both looking at me like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about this situation? And I would just freeze. It was exhausting. I just felt like I was constantly managing the emotional outcomes. I was scanning everybody's reactions and I always felt like I was being pulled into two different directions and there was pressure to choose a side. Like it was like nobody was allowed to actually have a real emotional experience because I was constantly jumping in and intervening and trying to smooth it over. So I'm in a new relationship, and this relationship has moved probably a little bit faster than any of my other relationships. And it's only because of location. Like my girlfriend was from Florida, then she moved to Michigan so that she could be close. After about a month of doing that, we decided that we would like to be closer, and so she booked a 2-month stay at an Airbnb just down the street from where I live. And we were very intentional about her being in her own space for strictly for my daughter, strictly so that my daughter could get used to her being around and, this relationship being a thing because up until this point, we had been by ourselves for so long and I hadn't brought anybody around in quite a few years. And so, just to adapt her to the changes of somebody new being in our lives. When she booked the 2-month stay, there was one weekend that was already booked. This current weekend is a long weekend in Canada, and somebody had already booked that weekend at the Airbnb. And so I told her, of course, you can come stay with us that weekend. That's not a problem, right? I'm not going to force her to go back to the US or find somewhere else. And so I naturally told her that she could stay. When she moved down the street, she obviously naturally started to spend a lot more time here. And in the beginning, it was fine. It was great. She started to come around more. We'd see each other instead of like twice a week, we started to see each other every day. And my daughter noticed. And so, she made a couple comments about my girlfriend being around more often. So I kind of got the sense that it was a little bothersome for her. And my girlfriend also got the sense too. But we didn't push it. Like we understand that her age and all of the things. Kind of getting the sense of how my daughter was feeling about the whole situation and knowing that my girlfriend needed a place to stay this weekend, I decided to tell my daughter in advance, like a week in advance. Oh, by the way, her Airbnb is not available, so she's going to come stay with us this weekend. Like, matter of fact, just facts. That's it. At first, she said, okay. Then maybe like 30 minutes later, she asked why. Why is the Airbnb booked? And so then I told her why. And then that was it. And it was over and it was fine. 3 days later, she asks me if she can go to grandma's this weekend. And so I said, of course, if you want to go to grandma's this weekend, you can go to grandma's this weekend. But then I sat for a minute and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to ask her directly. So I straight up said to her, are you choosing to go to grandma's because, my girlfriend is staying here this weekend? And she said yes. Now, if I was an older version of me, if in this moment I was an older version of me, I would have totally overfunctioned and tried to manage the experience. I would have told Lily that she was wrong for having those feelings and she should, try to be a little bit more considerate of, other people. I would have tried to convince her to stay. I would have, maybe softened it. When I told my girlfriend that my daughter decided to go to my grandma's, I would have tried to soften it in some way. I would have tried to smooth it over. I would have tried to manage it in some way so that nobody's feelings would have been hurt. But this time, I decided to just simply allow reality to be reality, which means my daughter, she gets to have space if she wants space. If, my girlfriend feels any kind of way about it, like rejected or anything like that, she's allowed to have those feelings too, right? And I'm allowed to want my partner to be here, even though those other things are going on. So like nobody has to be wrong in this situation. As I was sitting in this and I have, my daughter's experience on one side and I have my girlfriend's experience on the other, and I have what I want in the center. What I want is I want my girlfriend here. I realized that the only way that I could honor my desire for my partner to be here while also honoring, my daughter's autonomy was just simply allowing everybody to have their own emotional experience without me jumping in and doing anything about it. And this is so fascinating. It was so fascinating to be in that moment. And I guess technically I'm still in it, but to be grounded in myself and what I want while allowing my daughter to be upset, while allowing my partner to be upset, and just simply holding the truth of what is for me. My girlfriend is amazing. She completely understands, my daughter's perspective and how this is a lot for her. And so she immediately was like, should I find somebody, should I find somewhere else to go? I hate that you're being pulled in, two different directions. And it was like she was trying to like not be a burden and remove herself from the situation. And what was interesting is I actually was witnessing her try to overfunction in real time. Not in like a dramatic caretaking way, but in like minimization and self-removal and trying to manage the impact. But, despite her response, I stayed grounded in what I wanted. I wanted her here. Even though she was having that experience, like I wasn't trying to make her discomfort disappear. I just stayed connected to myself while all of that existed. And I think this is such a prime example of what emotional safety actually is. Like most people think emotional safety is somebody agreeing with you, where there's no tension within your relationship, there's no conflict, there's no hurt feelings, or like when there is conflict, it gets resolved really quickly. I'm realizing emotional safety is honesty, right? Everybody is allowed to honestly communicate how they feel, that there's differentiation, that we don't all have to agree. We don't all have to have the same emotional experience and the same outcome and have our outcomes in alignment in order for emotional safety to exist, right? Um, the nervous system capacity. I would not have been able to exist in this situation previously, to allow two people whom I love have their own emotional experience without me jumping in and trying to resolve their discomfort. And so, emotional safety is, from my perspective, being able to stay grounded while emotions move around you. So, I'm coming to learn that it's okay to allow, like, people can feel hurt without it equaling abandonment. People can need space without it meaning that they're rejecting you. Multiple emotional realities can exist at the same time. It does not need to collapse into one. I needed it to collapse into one previously out of fear of losing connection and losing relationship. But when that fear no longer exists, all that's left is space for each individual person to have their own emotional experience. And so this whole experience has been very cool because it's made me feel in real time what it's like to not manage everybody's emotional experience and still feel connection. Like I can deeply care about everybody's emotions and not overfunction. I can love everybody equally without controlling their feelings and trying to manage their feelings. And I can stay connected to myself and what I want and what's true for me while allowing them to navigate their own experiences. And I think none of this would have been possible without the foundation of the work that I teach around self safety and internal orientation. If I would have got pulled into my daughter's emotional experience, I would have been orienting around her. If I would have got pulled into my girlfriend's emotional experience, I would have been orienting around her. But I was able to stay grounded in myself and what I wanted and my experience and my truth and allow everybody else around me to make their own choices, decide what they want to do. Learning how to stop organizing myself around managing everybody else so I could finally stay connected to myself was the best gift that I gave to myself and to the people that I love.